Hey guys, it's Darius Vita, aka Komodo Dragon Jesus, making a new video here for PokerVIP. This is going to be the same format as my last few videos, so it's live play for tabling 100 no limit on Pokerstars. And as you guys can see, the action is already going in the background, so let's just jump right into it. I'm actually already in hand on the bottom right that I take down with a c-bet. Okay, so nothing too exciting there. Pocket Kings is, of course, a wonderful hand. The original razor here is quite loose. I like that. Let's see if the button decides to do anything. The play will basically be raise regardless of action before me because Kings is such an excellent hand. So let's start off with a 3-bet to $9. I'll also be starting off with a 3-bet to $8 with pocket jacks and pocket sixes in the top left. We'll start off with a call on the button. I'm going to make a 3-bet bluff on the bottom right with Jack 9 suited. I actually get called very quickly by Papa Gun. Which I don't mind. That's typically going to be a timing tell. He's not going to have anything incredibly strong, as most people would at least consider a 4-bet with very strong hands. Flopping second pair. This is one that I'm going to check back. Turning a flush draw is awesome. And he actually leads very quickly, which is a little concerning. He bets very large, which is also a little concerning. But with a pair plus flush draw, my hand is just far too strong to fold. So I'll be calling a turn. Board pairs on the river. We'll see what he does. If he checks on the river, I think this is just a nice spot to check back. I don't think we're getting value from anything worse by betting. I don't think we're really getting better hands to fold. So let's check back and see what he shows up with. He almost pots it on the turn with pocket fives. That's a bit of an odd play. There's also a hand going on in the top left where I turned a straight with pocket sixes. This is one that my plan was to go call, potentially raise the river, and now on the board pair on the river, do I want to raise for his last $47? And I think so. I think so. I think his continuing range is going to be looser than only full houses. I do expect this player to be weaker than normal, so I think they'll call down lighter. $9-10 is basically sometimes a raise for me. I'm going to take a quick peek at how aggressive the button is with his 3-bets, and the answer is not very aggressive at all, so that means I'm going to open up a 9-10 offsuit. So in the bottom right, I've defended ace-8 against a button min-raise. Flop comes fairly favorably for an ace-high. So facing a bet I would have called. Looks like it goes check-check. This is one of the hands I'm just going to try to get to showdown. Now he comes out with a half-pot bet on the turn. I will call. Ace on the river is great. I don't think leading is really going to get me much extra value, so I think checking is also going to be the play on the river. I am actually going to be 3-betting the King 4 suited in the bottom right against CLWW. On my sample with him, he has folded to a heck of a lot of 3-bets. So basically my game plan here is see if he's going to continue. And if he does continue, then just 3-bet him relentlessly with a whole bunch of hands, including some like King 4. And if it turns out that he does start defending more, then the game plan is just to tighten up. I want to be opening very, very loose on the button in the bottom right. The player to my direct left is playing nearly 80% of hands. And of course, getting squeezed when I have Jack 3 suited is not incredibly pleasant, so I'm just going to fold it. Seven five is a hand that I want to play on the button in the top right. I think it's going to be too loose for a call, so I'll throw in the 3-bet. I was strongly considering a call there, because I do have the 2 players that were in the blinds that hand marked as weaker players. I wouldn't necessarily mind going 3 or 4-way there. But in the end, I think it's very, 7-5 suited is probably, it's just on the weaker side, so I think 3-betting it will be a little bit better. Got nuts 99, we're going to take a quick peek at how often he raises from under the gun. 18%. Or a sample of 4,000 hands. That's a lovely sample. I'm going to be 3-betting my ace queens against him. That's actually a very loose opening range relative to a lot of the other regs at 100 no limit. And I get 4-bet, which is obviously not incredibly pleasant, but ace queen suited is a hand that is strong enough that's going to continue here. So click call, see a flop, flop a gut shot, 1 over card, a backdoor flush draw. Not the worst. He's going for a 2 street game, so he bets a little over half pot, and that sets up for a shove on the turn. I think this does have to be a call. If his range is purely value, then the odds aren't really there, but I do have to believe that he has some bluffs, especially when he is opening so wide from under the gun. And no complaints about the turn, guys. The only question is, do I want to check it back or do I want to shove? You know, on this board texture, I think that if he has a bluff, like let's say like ace-5 suited, that he 4-bet bluff pre-flop, I don't think he's going to bluff that on the river very often. So I think I just want to try to maximize value against hands that might be going for a check call on the turn and bet there. In the top right, I have a flush draw. The pot started out 4-way. I think it was a limped pot. I ended up leading, but once I get called by 2 players, I really don't think I have much fold equity. So even though I have the open ender and the flush draw here, I'm not going to bet into 2 people. I'm definitely not going to fold though. since I should have a lot of equity there. And on a board with paired queens, there's a fair amount of implied odds against anybody with a queen X. I'll be 4-betting, and I'll be 4-betting pretty large. Let's go up to 25 with ace king. It's 4-bet once again against a player playing 80% of hands. So even though we're in early and middle position, I'm very, very happy making that 4-bet. Not particularly happy with that flop though. This is a spot where I will be going for a check call, barring some sort of insane bet size on his part. Looks like it goes check check. So there's definitely a lot of 2-pair combos he can have that are ahead of me, but I think at least some of those bet on the flop. And because I assume his range is so ridiculously wide, I will just be betting for value here. For I think 28. Kind of a silly spot in the top. In the top right as well. I got min 4-bet by this guy, completely with the flop out of position. I think it just has to be a fold. Don't expect a flush coming out from this player on the bottom right ever. I think I do have to just jam for value for the last 83 into 104. It is quite a scary board, guys. I will admit that. But I really believe that he would be... he's not checking back strong hands on the flop. So because of that, I'm just assuming there's a whole bunch of hands that aren't in his range. Hands like King Jack, hands like sets. He can end up with trip 10s on the river. That's absolutely something I can give him credit for. But if he ends up with trip 10s on the river, then that means he also ends up with just a heck of a lot of ace X. And of course, just combinatorically, the amount of pairs outnumbers amount of trips you can have by quite a lot. So now I have a little bit of an interesting decision with the pocket fives. Because as I mentioned before, I want to 3-bet this button very, very often. And I think I could very profitably do so with the pocket fives. But facing a min raise with the very loose player in the big blind, I think it's going to be more profitable to make a call here. Let him into the pot. Of course, hit the set on the flop like a genius. And then see if I can extract some value. The fact that he bet is just awesome. And I'm wondering if I can throw in a raise. You know, I think I'm going to throw in a small raise here. Take the lead. Just bump it up to 12. If he's leading with a pair, I don't expect him to fold it to the raise. If he's leading with a draw, I don't expect him to fold it to the raise. And he led into 2 people, so I think the amount of just like random, you know, stuff like Jack 9 that he's leading is probably going to be pretty minimal. I'm going to bet 3/4 pot on the turn, and then jam literally any river. Jack 9 makes for a very nice call on the bottom left, facing the button min raise, and the small blind call, which, you know, pot odds are amazing. The hand is very nice. But the player who calls in the small blind is a reg. And I think his call there is dead money, probably something close to 95% of the time. So it makes the squeeze very, very attractive. Of course, when you squeeze with 7-9 suited and get 4-bet, it's not incredibly pleasant, but due to the very, very small 4-bet size, folding will not happen pre-flop. It's a very poor board for Jack-9. It's actually, it's a pretty poor board for like my calling range in general, just because of the 4-bet. The 4-better will be completely uncapped. So he can unfortunately get away with the small bet there. And I must fold. In the top left, I raise blind versus blind with Jack-8 offsuit, which is a little bit loose. But I do want to play pots with what I believe is a weaker player. He's on the tight side as well, folding over 60% blind versus blind. So I think, you know, that overall, being able to see a flop with the weaker player, you know, is not a bad option. And him folding pre-flop a lot is not that bad as well. I'm going to go for half pot for value with second pair, decent kicker in the top left. And all right, interesting spot. So going to the bottom right for a moment. I raised, got called once, squeezed by the small blind, overcalled by the big blind. And of course I overcall with my queen jack suited. It looks like it checks around flop. I think I can bet on the turn. I think Popgun is likely betting a lot of his strong hands, as is Carlos on this board. I don't even think I need to bet large. You know, I'm even going to bet less than half pot here. I'm going to bet 16. And it works out wonderfully. I get 3-bet by the big blind with king 5. I think king 5 makes a decent 4-bet. I don't think it makes a decent call. But facing Carlos SPB, I see that he doesn't frequently fold to 4-bets, so I'm going to tighten up my 4-bet range against him a little bit. I want to 3-bet my ace-jack against the loose player under the gun, but because he started the hand with 36 blinds, I want to go smaller here. I think I'm just going to go to 7. This gives him a lot less incentive to just jam over my, say I raised to 9 or even 8 here. The smaller the raise I make it gives him less incentive to just shove over it. And of course with a hand like ace-jack offsuit, I would not be happy getting shoved on. Okay, so I open 10-9 offsuit on the button, get called in the small blind, and get potted into on the flop. Yeah, it's going to be a fold. Six-5 offsuit is a little looser than I would typically raise, but I think this table is soft enough that I can justify it. king 10 offsuit on the 7-6-4 board. I don't think this is a texture that I can really bet any two cards on. So king 10 offsuit without a heart, I'm just going to choose check back. It does mean that I'm giving up on several turns, but it also means that I can improve on some turns, which is always nice. This is not one of, okay, sure, I guess I get a gut shot, but this is not a turn I'll be continuing on, especially facing the overbet. Blind versus blind, I raise ace king in the bottom right. This is a board that I'm just going to be check calling on. If my opponent here wants to check it down, I'm absolutely fine with that. And this is a very curious raise size. What kind of hands check back the flop and then bet pot, or I guess even slightly larger than pot due to the rake on the turn? I really think this is going to be a bluff heavy sizing. So I go for the call. I get a wonderful river card, so I'll be calling a river bet as well. Though frankly, I might have done that regardless. He's loose enough, it's absolutely possible he can have something like 6 deuce. And he ends up having jack 10, which is kind of as expected. Ace king facing the shove will of course be calling. And does not win the flip against pocket sixes. That's okay. In the bottom right, I once again had the opportunity to throw in 3-bet pre-flop. I think 3-betting 9-10 suited on the button is great. But once again, a very loose player in the small blind makes me think it'll be more valuable to throw in a flat and let him into the pot. Papa Gun checks. I think he'll be check folding this board at a fairly high frequency. So I am going to take a shot. I do have a gut shot with the 9-10. So it's not a pure bluff, but it's by no means super high equity. And the bluff gets through. Yay! Getting led into on the 8-9 jack with pocket fours. That makes for quite an easy fold. So 6-5 suited on the bottom right. This is, the same considerations went into this hand as they went in with the 10-9 suited. But this time the very loose player is on the button, so he would have position on me throughout the entire hand, which I'd rather avoid. So I decide to go for the 3-bet this time. 6-5 suited is also much weaker than 10-9. So calling it is going to be less attractive. I flop bottom pair, which is... that's not incredibly good. And okay, so I guess this is a common theme for the video. Check back pairs, turn pair plus flush draw, and just get potted into. This just, once again, is not going to be a fold. Ooh, oh, okay. Yikes, okay, sorry guys. My internet seems to have cut out for a second. Just a second? Okay, well, let me catch up on my plays here. For $1, I'm not going to be folding the king 2 in the top right. And then, of course, a lovely river hitting a flush. The question is now sizing. I I think 35 is a pretty nice sizing. I could potentially go for the overbet, but I think that just gets a little too many check folds. As then he's just going to start folding a whole bunch of his pairs. In the bottom left, we just saw a hand very briefly, looked kind of uninteresting. Blind versus blind, Carlitos check folded to me on the 997 board. I think that's, if players aren't balancing their checking ranges very well, I think that's a really nice spot to just go for a barrel and don't really stop, because many players aren't really going to be checking a 9 on that board. Many players also typically aren't going to be checking many flush draws or straight draws in general on that or any other board. So it's a flop where there is an absurd amount of runouts that you can just barrel the opponent off of. So I like throwing in that bet. I will start with a small c-bet with the king-jack as a semi-bluff for the gut shot. Papa Gun, of course, is in the hand, but I'm not really tailoring my plays towards Papa Gun. I'm tailoring them more towards the 80% VPIP player who of course has position on me. So I don't really think his calling range changed based on my sizing on the flop, and therefore I just bet half pot, which is fairly small on the ace-queen flush draw texture. Interesting turn. I don't really think Papa Gun is going to have many sets here. So full houses on the river. Can be chopping. I guess you can bet 2 pair, something like an ace-10. I do kind of expect to see flush here a lot, but I still think that king-jack is probably going to be way too strong to fold. So, alright, I'm calling, but I'm not really happy about it. Let's go with that. And that is a very, very odd play by Papa Gun. Okay, so let's get back to that in a moment. I got 2 hands going on in the top right. Both the ace and the straight come in on the river, so I will be folding. And I get a pot-size bet, I guess slight overbet on the top left. I have top pair. If you guys have been paying attention to this table throughout the video, No Name has just been kind of crazy. He's been, I think a couple of hands ago, he shoved 100 big blinds pre-flop over a 2x or a 3x raise. So I'm just labeling this guy as kind of crazy, and I'm going to try as hard as I possibly can to not fold my pair, facing a whole bunch of action. Of course, that doesn't happen. He just checks back the turn, and now I'll just be going for value. I think if he wanted to continue with a bluff, he would do it on the turn rather than on the river. And I would typically bet around half pot here, but because I do think this player is weaker, I think I can go just a little bit bigger. Let's go for 12. So going back to this play by Papa Gun, I'm not really sure what he's thinking there. He's in a 3-way pot, and he leads his top pair. He has a poor kicker when the flush comes in. So naturally, I expected his range to be much tighter than what he actually showed up with. I think he was very likely overvaluing his top pair there. Though I do imagine if I folded and he just got action out of the 80% VPIP, it likely would have been a profitable play for him. I 3-bet 10-9 suited in the top left table, flop second pair, on a board that typically will be pretty good for the 3-bet caller. So I start off with a check. I like to have some pairs in my checking range, as well as some ace-high type hands. The turn is going to be another check. I don't actually expect a lot of kings to be in his range. Ace-king is, of course, you know, the big king that can absolutely be there every time, especially if he's not 4-betting a lot. This guy does typically 4-bet quite frequently over a smallish sample. So I don't expect too many ace-kings. I don't expect many king-queens because I think they'd bet the flop with the gut shot. Don't expect king-jack, king-10. Hit trips on the river, which is always a lovely. I'm just going to bet 11 for value. I think checking one more time would be a mistake. In the bottom left, I flop middle pair, and middle pair no kicker 3-way is a hand that at most I'm really going to try to get one street of value. That street could have been on the turn, but by checking back on the turn, I also give both players the opportunity to bluff the river. And that way I occasionally get some value from both hands that I actually beat at showdown, but from some bluffs as well. And I will be value betting. I do think both these players' ranges are going to be pretty weak. I'll bet on the small side for a little over half pot. And there we go. I feel like this is potentially a little bit on the tight side, as I just folded the queen deuce after checking back the flop. Now the thought that went through my head is that Cranberry is not an incredibly aggressive player. He ends up showing a full house, which, you know, awesome if we're being results oriented. But I think on that board, if I'm planning, if I think the action will go one bet and then showdown a fair amount of the time, like if I don't think he's going to double barrel a lot of his bluffs, I think you can make that call. But in a situation where he's not going to be giving up on his bluffs, if he's going to be double barreling me with bluffs and I'm going to be folding river every time, then I'm never going to win against his bluffs. And if he bets and it goes check, check, without a bluff, I don't really expect my queen with a deuce kicker to win a showdown. I guess I was chopping kickers. I wouldn't expect to win a showdown very often. And most of the time it would be chopping at best. So basically, if I expect him to double barrel his bluffs, I'm kind of in a no-win scenario on that river. Unless I want to pick off all his bluffs, but then of course I pay off all his value hands as well. And if I think he's not incredibly aggressive, then I wonder how many bluffs he'll have there. You know, I'm curious about that hand. I'm actually going to go in here, going to mark this hand for review. Guys, this is an awesome tool in Poker Tracker. You go in here, you can tag hands, You tag them good hand, bad hand, review, straight hand, tilt, whatever you feel like. I mark hands for review a whole bunch, and that's one way to improve your game. And I'm curious if that should have been a call. Oh, I guess I'll look into that later. Ace-8, I thought about bluffing. I think there's a lot of rivers that I have a lot of fold equity on. But we're up against Papa Gun. I saw Papa Gun do the very weird thing with his top pair. So I'm not sure if a lot of my normal assumptions would really apply to him. Assumptions like I would have a lot of fold equity on, say, a flush or a straight completing on that river. I do think he's fairly weak on that river, though, so I do value bet my third pair top kicker. And yeah, it looks like it just got a fold. So in the top left, I did flop a gut shot, but I'm up against two players on an extremely coordinated board. This is not going to be a board I'm going to c-bet extremely light. And I guess that makes my decision easy. After the bet and the raise, I'll be folding. And another potentially interesting spot up here with Papa Gun raising two players on this board. Of course, some value hands like pocket fives make sense here. But I'm always curious to see what he ends up with if he shows up with an odd hand like he did last time. My 8-9 suited in the bottom right gets 3-bet, but it gets 3-bet very small, and against that sizing I won't be folding. Unless the big blind decides to go all in. Yeah, I think that'll do it. And due to pot odds, he has no fold equity here, so we get a nice little peek at what Got Nuts would be getting his money in with. Papa Gun still throwing all the money in the middle. With Ace-8. All right, so I think we might be seeing a little bit of tilt here, guys, which is of course always a fun part of poker if you tilt less than the other guy. Okay, so Queen-9 offsuit is a mediocre hand to be barreling here. But Got Nuts is a player who does not like to fold in position. We see, looking at his stats, 16% fold to 3-bet or c-bet in position. So what that means is I am going to be taking my range and either c-betting a lot tighter with it, meaning I'll be a lot more value heavy. Or I'm just going to 3-barrel him a whole bunch, because if he has his entire preflop range and he continues 85% of it, and then he continues 70% of that on turns, though that is, you know, likely a number that's a little bit skewed due to sample size, his range is going to be extremely wide in basically all spots. So I am going to triple barrel here, run into a spot where he has top 2 pair, which, you know, I'm not incredibly fond of. But I still think it's a spot, especially on the flush river. You can get a lot of 1-pair hands to fold, so I think I have a good amount of fold equity there. In the top right, I got led into on the flop, which I promptly raised with 2 pair. Then of course got counterfeited on the turn, so the turn will be a check back. River will likely be a fold, but he checks to me. I will just check back, expecting to have some showdown value. It looks like he makes a lead play with ace-queen. That doesn't really make much sense to me, but all right. And in the bottom right, I faced a 3-bet pre-flop with ace-jack, called, and I would like to continue pretty loose on this board, but facing 14 into 16, I think that's a large enough bet size that I can really just fold out my ace-jack. I expect Cranberry's range to be very pair heavy in the top left here, so I'm not going to be c-betting my ace-king on this board. I do think I call the turn, which is I do think this is a fine spot. I have to believe that he's betting sets and 7s plus on the flop. So it doesn't leave an incredible amount of value hands for him to be betting on the turn other than 10x. But now, of course, the flush draw comes in. He can, of course, still have 10x. I'm going to be folding my ace-king high on the river. And okay, guys, we get to have some fun here. This is a heads-up match. The table is breaking right after this hand. Ace-king is wonderful. I'm going to 4-bet it. We are pretty deep here. I don't necessarily just want to get it all in, but I think 4-betting is just still going to be extremely good there because I expect him to continue a fair amount, not with just 5-betting or folding, but calling as well. I can't get myself to fold ace-jack high to $3. This is potentially a spot where I give away a little bit too much money. With those kind of odds, I'm really not folding there. And guys, I think that's going to be a good spot to wrap up the video. We've been going for about 45 minutes now. As usual, thank you for watching, and I would appreciate any feedback, any comments, questions you guys may have. You can post those. You can post those in the comments along with the video. I do try to answer or respond to all questions and comments. Hope you guys enjoyed. Once again, this has been Darius Vida, aka Komodo Dragon Jesus, making a video for PokerVIP. Thanks for watching.